I am lucky enough to have the 2020 Intense Sniper cross-country bike here with me today. And thanks to my buddy Brian, who is kind enough to let me watch over Silver Fox while he is on vacation. While this is a cross-country bike, it handles way more than most people realize. And thanks to its pretty trail-friendly geometry, this bike was a beast both up and down the hills.
Put as much weight on the front.
You know, for reference, my bike is a 2021 Intense Primer 27.5. This bike is a pro build and weighs in at just below 24 pounds according to the Intense website. Now, I'm not here to dive deep into the geometry, but I will cover the things that I personally care about. And first off, this bike is a size large, and the head tube angle is 67.5 degrees. You know, it's not super slack, but I'm happy for that, as on steep climbs, it keeps the front wheel from coming up on me. It is slack enough that I never had any second thoughts on descending anything. The bike has 29-inch wheels, which is basically the standard for cross-country bikes nowadays. And I did notice the difference of the large wheels as I'm coming from a 27.5 wheel trail bike. On the uphills, this bike is an absolute beast. I always knew cross-country bikes were faster on the uphills, and this bike really showed me that. On this particular climb, my previous best was 12 minutes, 50 seconds. And my very first attempt with this bike, it was 11 minutes and 2 seconds, which is almost 2 minutes faster.
Brakes lock up so fast.
And you know, just because this bike is 100 millimeters travel front and rear doesn't mean this thing is a slouch at downhill. Intense calls this the modern day XC bike. They designed the bike to be long, low, and slack. They believe that short travel bikes should descend like their long travel siblings.
Yeah, it's a cross-country bike, but the head angle is pretty slack. And the geometry is pretty nice towards, you know, normal downhill riding. But overall, I mean, this bike is awesome. It almost makes me wonder if I picked the wrong bike. Having less travel is sometimes nicer, especially for, you know, maybe your trails don't necessarily need all that extra travel.
And thanks to the longer top tube, shorter stem, wider bars, and a lower bottom bracket, and a slacker head tube angle, this bike is so much fun to descend on. And coming down the same uphill that I PR'd this bike on, I was able to easily beat my best time by a few seconds on the downhill. I think I can do even better if I get more of a feel for this bike. There was no transition period really of getting used to this bike versus my primer. I got on it and I just started ripping the downhill.
There's one problem about borrowing this bike is I'm gonna get PRs I'm never gonna be able to touch without getting a bike like this.
I don't know if I would buy this bike right here. This is the 100 millimeter travel, and it's super efficient and fun, but the 120 millimeter version of this bike that they call the Sniper Trail is the bike that I would pick up. They even have the 120 millimeter version as a 951 series bike that comes in at a cheaper price point. The slightly slacker head tube of 66.5 and additional 20 millimeter travel would make for an amazing trail bike. And I'm a firm believer that most people overbike and honestly overtire.
Wow, this bike rolls over that really easily.
People think that more travel is better, which honestly, as I have found myself progressing, I've wanted less travel. And I think 130 millimeter is a super nice sweet spot. This has made me consider if I actually have the wrong bike. Well, you know what they say, the proper amount of bikes to own are N plus 1. And on that bombshell, I'll see you next time.